Hello, how we doing? Is
Good
everybody here?
day,
Howdy. We
good
may
night.
speak.
Howdy.
We are live and
Yes.
alive, and it is working, and I'm very happy. Um, so, if anybody is actually watching this, if miracles do happen, welcome to the live stream. Great to have you with us. I'm talking very, very gently because my baby is in bed 2 doors down, and well, I don't want to get the blame for him being awake, so that's fair enough. So, fellas on the stream, why don't you introduce yourselves?
So that you can break the ice.
Who, me? Right. Okay, I shall begin.
Go for it.
Hi, I'm George. I don't know what specifically you'd like to hear. My blood type is O negative. I'm a Pisces. Um, I enjoy long walks on the beach, and sometimes I partake in narrative theory construction according to Todorovian elements.
Very nice. Welcome
Thank
on
you.
board.
Thank you.
How are we gonna top that, eh?
Well, indeed. Well,
Karu?
now's your chance.
Well, I'm based in South Africa with the other two fellows as well, and I've got the privilege of being one of the first in the communitas. But I love sci-fi because of the emotional aspect to it specifically. I'm a very emotional person, and that's something that I look for in films, in story, how it speaks emotionally, and I'm hoping to get a lightsaber in the next 5 years as a gift from my wife, and I've got two beautiful boys. That's it.
I gotta say, 5 years is a pretty low bar. Saying one lightsaber in the next 5 years. What is it you asked me to get you?
He said that 5 years ago as well.
Is that right?
He did not know me 5 years ago.
You definitely asked me to get you something if we hit 10,000 subscribers, but I can't remember what it was.
That was the lightsaber,
That
but
was the
then you said it's
lightsaber.
only going to be a Disney version. I was hoping for a Star Wars theory,
Right. Okay.
Sabers version.
Right. If we get to 1,000 subs, I am going to get you a Star Wars theory saber.
Wow,
Yeah.
I am gonna overwork now.
Nice. You get on board, fella.
That's
Everyone watching the stream, please make it happen for a fellow peasant in South Africa.
Get this guy a lightsaber. Come on.
yes. So my name is Leon, and I really love cars, and I really told some people that I would love a car as a gift sometime in the near future. No, I'm joking. Uh, I I I also have a real interest in film and the way it's put together. Usually, the more creative aspects that it showcases, the editing side and all of that. And yes, I'm just happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really glad to have you guys on board. I'm very glad to have met you all. And I'm so glad for all the help that you've given me with OBS and Discord so that we can actually make this live stream work at all, because I haven't got a clue what I'm doing with those things. I've been filmmaking for years, but that seems like old technology now. So for the streaming side of things and this kind of thing, I've needed you guys so very, very much. So I'm really glad that you're on board. And before anybody who's watching gets so bored they want to switch off, why don't I tell you what we're going to talk about? Because Giroud, the peasant podcast over here, is the fellow who's put this little party together, and is gathering people. Is doing a really great job of gathering people who love science fiction, who love storytelling, who love filmmaking, but who are not that happy with the way things are going right now. I've got a script on this screen over here, so I'm just going to read it to you. This is in this gentleman's words what I'm bringing here. So okay, what is ex uno? Okay, so ex uno is, first of all, it's Latin, and it's Latin for a reason. It means from one. So it's from one, I'm the one. I'm creating a thing that I am then turning over to other people to finish off, to add to it, and to build to it. So from one creator to many. I have this conviction that story is not something that should be told by a small number and enjoyed by a large number. I don't think that's the way it's worked in human history at all. In fact, for the very great majority of human history, the whole community was involved in the storytelling process. So there were no particular Egyptians that owned the rights to Ra, for instance. What a ridiculous idea. And yet, for the last 200 years, since copyright really came in, that's exactly what's happened. A small number of people have the right to tell the stories, and the rest of us have to just shut up and buy the book. Shut up and watch what we tell you and get excited for the next product. And it's broken. And I think we all know that it's broken, but we don't all know why it's broken. Well, now I'm telling you, this is the way it is. With Exuno, we're looking to change the whole game. So this is a mythology that knows that it's a mythology. So we're being very deliberate about building something that is actually a proper mythology, like Greek mythology, like Egyptian or Celtic or whatever. And anything that has a fandom. So I'm not talking about stuff that's just, a casual viewer will just watch it and then turn off and go and watch something else. Anything that actually has fans, people who are invested in it, people who have actually decided ahead of time, I'm going to watch the whole series of movies. I'm going to buy the whole series of books. People who get dressed up, they go to, Comic-Con or whatever. People who have as one of their great ambitions to get a lightsaber, things like people like this. They don't just want to read a story or watch a film. They want to inhabit a world. Well, that's a myth culture. That's exactly the same as the ancient myth cultures that we've had throughout time that have created all the great stories that Hollywood still keeps rehashing today. It's the same mentality. And when you see like ancient carvings and stone carvings and stuff like that, and paintings on walls and stuff, what you're seeing is fan art. It's exactly the same thing. And fan fiction is a word that we use now to say this is when the fans are telling the part of the story. Whereas all of the ancient myths that we all know, that's how they came about. Not from some dude behind a desk writing something that he sold, but by members of the community telling their own versions of the stories. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a universe. In fact, I've already created a universe. It's big, it's complex, it's very, very detailed. And the idea is members are then able to come and play inside of that universe and write stories and create stories and invent characters that will be, unlike fan fiction, fully canon. Everything that you create will be added to the overall canon. And so the canon itself will be grown by the membership. And I think this is what will excite a lot of people. It will be fully monetizable as well. Which I think is one of the great tragedies of fan fiction, where you get loads of stuff that people are putting their own time and their own money into, and then the studios that own the rights, who didn't put a stick of effort into it at all, say, but you can't make money on that because the idea of it belongs to us. And it only belongs to them usually because they bought it from the creator. So the people who are usually getting lots of lawyers involved are not the creators very often. So Exuno is a completely different way of doing things. It's a different way of looking at mythology and mythos and how we build it and how we tell stories. So how does it work? Well, I'm going to get into the detail of the two specific roles next week, I think. But consider that there are myth makers and myth keepers. And the second one is really important. So myth makers, I think that the title's pretty self-explanatory. You tell a story, you create the myth. You are now part of the myth because you've told your part of the story. Now that could be writing a story, it could be making a film, it could just be creating some art. This is what I think this character would look like in the future, and then filmmakers can use that character, use that design, use that you came up with, and integrate it. So there's a lot of collaboration there. But the other role that I think is really important as well is myth keepers. And let me give you an example of this in practice. Netflix made a documentary series a while ago. I think it was Jada Pinkett Smith led it, and it was all about great black women of history. And I think they opened up with Cleopatra, trying to claim that Cleopatra was black. Now, all the evidence, 100% of it says no, she wasn't. We even have her likeness still on coins from the period, so we know what she looked like. We know that she was Greek, or she was a descendant of a Greek guy. So we know all of this stuff. And the government of Greece actually sued Netflix for saying this. Now, is it their myth? Well, they didn't create it. All the stories around Cleopatra, they didn't create that story. But they own it because they're Greek. They own it because they're Egyptian. They own their history because it's their community. And what we have at the moment is fans feeling very locked out of the creative process. The studios, the great high and mighty, they create it. All the fans can do is shut up and watch it. And if they don't like what they're getting, if they say, yeah, but that's not what happened and you've rewritten it and I don't like it. Yeah, but Kylo Ren is a replacement of Ben Solo and I don't like it. Yeah, but Luke Skywalker should have done something great like he did in the Heir to the Empire series. That was fantastic. You've turned him into a whiny old man who dies in the first movie that you reintroduce him in. I don't like it. For them to be told, oh, well, you're just a bunch of whingers, you're just a bunch of man babies. No, they're members of the community. This is their myth. It's not legally their myth, but it's morally their myth. And you depend on them buying the tickets. You depend on them buying the lightsabers. You depend on them going to watch the next 3 movies that you've already commissioned at a cost of $1 billion each. You're depending on them being there. So why not pay them the respect of considering them part of this community? Well, that's what Ex Uno does. There are myth makers who tell the stories, but there are myth keepers who have the job of keeping the community proper, keeping the story proper, which means even though creators can come on board and they can write stories and they can join in, the community gets to vote. Is this what Ex Uno is supposed to be? Is this true to what we set up in the first place? Now, this doesn't mean that they can simply say, you don't get to make a film, you're banned. But there will be power in the community to vote things up and to vote things down. So we're actually going to give power over, not to gatekeepers who use the term real fans, all the real fans will like it, I hate that terminology. But people who will be allowed to say, this is mine because I belong to it. This is the culture that I belong to. This is the club that I belong to. And that gives me some agency. And so we're going to go into some more detail in the next few streams about this. But I figured what I'll do, I'm actually going to pause there because I'm sure that's a whole bunch of stuff. In fact, you guys have heard most of this before, but I'm guessing you've got some questions. So feel free to ask away and let's see if we can tease out this concept. I'm going to go slow over a few weeks because this is a radically different thing. And I can't just, drop a whole bunch of information and think people are going to get it. This took me 30 years to come up with. So it's going to take a bit of time to unravel. So if anyone has any questions, feel free, fire away.
I think I would just quickly highlight even what you were saying is that one of the things I learned from John in this last year that I'm quite appreciative of in the realm of mythology is that there's actually such a thing as modern mythology. Because you have the same moral questions and dilemmas and things that ancient mythology tried to answer that people still have today, and that's even why I personally can relate to some of these universes like Star Wars, like a character like Anakin and the wrestle that he went through. There's a reason why it speaks to us emotionally because it's because of modern mythology. And that's why I'm very intrigued to see what happens next, for more myth makers and myth keepers to join and to bring their perspective, because that's really what it's about. And so I would just briefly mention that. And there's also my beautiful wife in the background of my camera, if
Hello.
anyone saw that.
I've got
a
what are you chocolate
saying?
Easter egg in the back of mine, which I need to get rid of. But I just noticed it on the screen. I'm like, I can't believe I didn't get rid of that. Just on that, dead quick.
I thought it was an Easter egg.
Hey,
Is it?
it used
I'm
to
being
be an
funny.
Easter egg. It's a box now.
That's good.
But yeah. So yeah, just on that really quick, Kiri. I think it's a really good point. And it's worth pointing out that because you guys are South African, I'm expecting stories from a South African perspective that I could never write. You guys have a history that I don't know. So if I'm creating a story, here's a universe of stuff that happens to the whole of the human race. What you tend to get is Hollywood's filter on what that would look like. And it usually is a fairly bad idea of what it's like to live in most of the world, and a sycophantic idea of what it's like to live in China because they just want Chinese money now. So what you're not getting is authenticity. And what you very often get is when they're trying to be inclusive and diverse, it's awful. So I am saying, okay, I am not going to try and impose diversity as being a white guy trying to talk about a black woman, for instance. I don't know what that life is, but guys, you've got a perspective from your point of view that I can't possibly match. So when we create this story of humanity, it becomes a far denser, richer tapestry because people are writing from their own perspective from around the world. Now it's a truly diverse story and no one had to impose it on anyone. Anyway, I'm done. Anybody, questions, comments?
I'll jump in with the idea of creating a new mythos, a new mythological framework. Almost, it's a fascinating idea because of the arguments for, like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. It's a traditional, stereotypical. There's an old man. There's a zero to hero. There's an enemy. There's resolution at the end. This traditional style of story. Now that comes in millions of different flavors, and I think what I find fascinating about the project is not the claim that this style of story is redundant or overused or unnecessary, but the fact that it's been the way in which the traditional stories, the archetypal journeys have been taken over by corporations or what's the right word? By the institutions that be. It takes away from the value of a new flavor of the story. I mean, Frodo is the same as Luke Skywalker, is the same as Harry Potter, is the same in story strategy, but the way in which it's presented can be enjoyed by different people in different environments, in different genres, in different fields, and I think that's the magic of using the drive for creating mythology we all have. And I think limiting that drive, that's where the danger and the disappointments and the frustration comes in. So allowing the openness of different milieus, different frames of reference for creating the stories. So you said South African. I mean, we're going to have either really traditional Bantu mythology being brought into comparisons with sci-fi themes, or you're going to have highly politicized commentary on the structure of what should have happened in the ship from the South African perspective or whatever. But you've got these highly diverse and individual frames of reference for how to deal with the subject material. And I think that's where my question is the subject material itself, how much of it is defined, and how does the interplay between the, for argument's sake, myth makers, if that's the authors, the artists, the whatever, where do they jump into the systems that are already existing, the story that's already written? How do they interact and how do they play around with that?
Excellent question. I'm very glad you asked. So, I mean, there's a little more detail about this on the website, ex-uno.com, where we go into this a little bit. So there are three elements. There's what I'm calling the Magna Veritas. Everything's in Latin. The reason it's in Latin, by the way, is because it's a dead language. Everybody has to translate it, because otherwise, if I'd done this in English, then you guys would have to translate it in Afrikaans, but someone in America can just read it straight away. So I figured, no, let's do something in a language that belongs to no one, so we're all on a level playing field. So the Magna Veritas, or the grand truth, grand story, is kind of the Bible. It's if you used to, I'm going to put it in World War II terms. So it would be like a timeline of all the things that happened between the invasion of Czechoslovakia through to Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So you got all the events there. Those events are set in stone. They're immovable. Those are the events that people lived through. But if you think about it, it's a very different story looking at that from the point of view of a German soldier or an Austrian soldier, or someone living in Italy who didn't even vote for Mussolini, but that's the world they're living in now, to North Africa, to South Africa, to Australia. I mean, it was a shock to me to learn that Australians generally don't like Winston Churchill very much, because he kind of abandoned them to their fate. That they were going to get invaded, and Churchill said, "Oh, they're too far away. There's nothing we can do." I was shocked. They hate him, So you get radically different points of view of the same event just by the fact that you live in a different place and you're in a different culture. So the Magna Veritas is the timeline of events. And then What I'm creating is a thing called the A canon, and this is where I tell the stories of the big central events. So if I was to put it in World War II terms again, I would say this is what happened at the Battle of Normandy. This is what happened in the Normandy landings. That's the story. This is what happened in the liberation of Western Europe. This is what happened. So the big things, the events that people lived through, this is what I'm creating. And that's called the A canon. So the Magna Veritas is the timeline. The A canon are the individual stories of the things that happen in that timeline. But then we have what I'm calling the Alpha canon. And I'm using A and Alpha, not A and B, because it's not that one is above the other. They're just a different way of saying the same thing. So the Alpha canon, instead of being the events that people live through, it's the stories of the people who lived through the events. So the A canon is the Normandy landings. Alpha canon would be Saving Private Ryan. That's not the story of the Normandy landings, but of people who were there and what they did. So A canon talks about the liberation of Europe. Alpha canon would talk about the Diary of Anne Frank and what happened to her family and those in the situation. So I would never be able to put in the detail of everything that happened to everybody who lived throughout those things. I'm not going to. I have no intention of doing that. Here are the big events that humanity lived through, and now you create some stories of people who lived through those events. So the A canon is the backdrop to the Alpha canon. The Alpha canon is entirely a blank slate. You can tell the story of people who lived through that, were impacted by that, people who had a significant role in that, even people who just happened to live at the same time and it didn't even affect them that much. I don't care. It's fine. Build out the world however you see fit. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so there's specific events that are planned or set, and then around these, the Saving Private Ryan's a good example that makes complete sense. You know, we can't change World War II, but every 2 years there's a new World War II movie coming out, or something that happens. I think my question then would be how do I come into contact with what has been written in A canon, what has happened, and for argument's sake, I want to design a spaceship. I want to write a story about someone. How do I know who I get to write about and who I shouldn't, and in what the area is?
Okay.
So what? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfectly good question. So that's going to be driven from me because I'm only going to do it in stages. So I don't want to open the whole universe out and everybody does everything, because then trying to piece together what happens anywhere is going to be a bit of a mess. So I'll be releasing everything in phases. So now here's the A canon event that talks about this section of the story. And it really does open up a whole world of possibilities. So anyone can tell a story about that. And then I'll open up phase 2, the next event, etc. Now, just because I've opened up, say I'm on the 3rd or 4th or 5th event that we're opening up, doesn't mean you still can't tell a story about the first event. You can. Once an A canon is published, it's fair game for anyone. What I'm going to do ahead of time with some stuff, I'm going to actually put out some like competitions and stuff. So on the website already, it's an in-universe thing, because I'm trying to keep everything in universe. So there's a whole bunch of spaceship designs there already for what I'm calling the Royal Space Navy, which is like the UK's space defence force. And there's a tender on there where the Ministry of Defence is putting out a tender for the designs of new spaceships. So this is where people can come along, and we haven't launched it properly yet, but we're also going to be launching a competition to design a new suit of armor. Because it's in universe, the way we're driving it is it's as if you're not just saying here's a poster, here's a fancy picture that I made. Come up with an actual design, and we're going to treat it as if you are a defense contractor who's tendering for the award of this new ship or whatever. Now,
Yeah, that's cool.
Everything that is submitted will then become canon as a spaceship design that was submitted to the MOD, or that's the Ministry of Defence. So no matter what you do, it will then become canon. It's just the ones that win the competition in canon will be the ones that were selected for the contract. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think a cool example even that you can tell me if it's a good fit And Custard, I would like to hear your thoughts as well. Your screen above me, but that I've recently started looking into like tabletop role-playing games, and it sounds all fun and games to create a world, and then when I started looking into it, I'm like, this is a lot of effort, takes a lot of time. Um, but what's more fun and easier is to start out with just designing your own character that functions in a world that's already pre-made, and there's some rules and things that's set already. And I think that's what's so appealing about Exuno, is that there's all these things that's already in place, but it doesn't limit you to be creative. It doesn't limit me to be creative inside of the A canon of Exuno. So I've got all this liberty in the Alpha canon, and I think that's what myself, as someone that is growing to be creative, is looking forward to participate, because I don't have to worry about the big events. I can focus on the specific details of where I want to be creative.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's I think that's something that's quite amazing about this, because you have people who, like, I've tried before, let's say, having fun and creating your own world, right? But then you just don't, just personal preference, you don't have as much fun as with doing that as playing a character in a, like Harry said, in a world that's already set. So you kind of have that personal freedom to experience it the way you choose to. Either you can build a new story or a new reality or a world or whatever, or you can just be a part of one that already exists, which is actually perfect, because everybody has different preferences, right? I think my question comes in with, can you do, let's say, both? You already have a role that you've played in, let's say, being a character in a story. Do you have the freedom to then also create your just create upon that as well, or are you limited to only doing one thing, if that makes sense?
Wait, what do you mean? So if you've already created a story within Exuno?
Yeah. Can you create more than one story within Exuno?
Yeah, of course you can. Create as many as you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No. Just general curiosity.
Like one
That's cool.
role in like something he can do, can you do another? That's actually a good question. I actually don't know the answer to that, John. So if I am, the captain or the general of the South African armies, and I submit that and it's accepted, and now it's part of the Alpha Canon, um, would I be limited, like you have Captain America in the MCU? There was also the Torch in Fantastic Four, so now you start having these weird multiverse problems.
No.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was. Sorry.
Yeah. No. I get where you're coming from, guys. So it's okay. One thing that I should probably point out: it's not a free for all. So as he mentioned, there is a submission process. There is a submission process. We want to make sure that what people are doing is actually good. What we don't want is, like 55,000 NAF AI videos that someone made in an afternoon, just flooding the channel. I don't want sci-fi porn. We're not looking. It's X-Uno, not X OnlyFans. So we do have some guidelines here, but the guidelines are trying to be as permissive as possible. But we've got a stable universe here. So, for instance, in this universe, there are no superheroes. There are no people with superpowers, but it's a sci-fi universe. So if you want to tell a story about someone who did some Tony Stark type thing that is grounded and believable, go ahead. That's fine, as long as it doesn't take away the general ethos of what we're creating. The general sort of look and feel of it. No, that's absolutely fine. And we have rules as well. And this is a thing to always consider as a creator. Once your work is part of Exuno, others can then riff on it. So you create a character, someone else can then use that character in their own story. There are rules on that about monetization. So if you create a character and someone else uses it, if the project actually makes any money, then they do owe you a set royalty of that. Now, you can always choose to waive it. If you want to just kind of open source everything that you're creating, that's fine. But no one can force you to do that. This isn't so much to protect people from small-time creators, but sooner or later, Netflix is going to come knocking for one of these stories. Sooner or later, a studio is going to get involved, especially if the community grows and this becomes like Warhammer. You know, it grew a massive community that suddenly is monetizable. Then someone's going to come knocking. And what I don't want is there to be no framework in there that protects you guys that created the stories from some big studio being able to use it. So it's actually, I think what I said was it's a percentage of the production budget or a percentage of the income. Sort of the first dollar gross profits, whichever is greater. So anyone can use your work, but you can use anyone else's work. But the two rules are: if there's money in it, you share that, and there's a set pay structure for doing that you know ahead of time, and also it's non-destructive. So you can't undo someone else's story. You know, you can't retcon what someone else did. If someone said this character did this on this date, then that's set in canon. Anyone else can tell the next chapter, but they just can't undo the last chapter, if that makes sense.
Very cool.
Are there general, possibly stupid question, but do you have general set rules inside of the universe? So, just for an example, like time travel, or like, for example, superheroes, or do you have like general set rules that if somebody submits something, you will say, listen, we don't allow this in the universe, and what would those sets of things be?
Yeah, there are set rules. I mean, there's too many to go through, obviously, in the stream. But yeah,
Okay.
it's basically we're setting the tone of what the universe is. So anything that's outside of that tone doesn't fit. And again, anything that's non-destructive. So if someone introduced time travel to Star Wars tomorrow, people will be up in arms because it's like, well, why have we never seen it? Why hasn't it ever been there? Why did the Holdo maneuver work? Why haven't, I mean, if you can light speed ram something, why don't they have light speed torpedoes? Why haven't they had them for 10,000 years? You know, so yeah, I mean that's an example of something that's just incongruous. So on the whole, there's massive freedom there, but you've just got to stick within the sort of the framework of what the universe is.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that's good.
Comments. No, go for it, George. You can take the mic.
Cool. Now, I'm wondering how you, and this is probably a rhetorical question, but how you manage all this, in the sense of how do you manage, for argument's sake, 50,000 submissions every month about new introductory characters, new plot lines, new etc., etc. If it is truly free reign, which I understand it to be, in the sense of you interact with the existing universe. It's not free reign, do whatever you want. But if you follow those parameters, and there's 1,000 parameters, there's bound to be, if or when the project takes off, you're bound to have thousands of submissions weekly, in many different fields. So would the long-term plan be, well, until that point, your contextual submissions, that's guaranteed to be fitting in universe, like designing the spaceships. It's a fantastic idea because you present the thing, you give it in, and that is in the canon. There's no double checking, is the format okay? No, because you're filling in a governmental form. It's going to be fitting in the format and things that need to be presented. But if there's new plot lines, new characters, new interactions, new is there a plan? Do you have a specific plan on how to manage the growth and the influx of incoming projects, if I can call it that, rather than characters?
It's part of the reason why we're releasing things in stages. So we're only going to release something when we know we've got the infrastructure there to be able to handle it. At this moment in time, I've got a total of 3 people interested, and you're on the screen with me. So I'm pretty sure I could handle submissions from you guys. But as it grows, the income is going to grow as well. And when it gets to the point where we need to take someone on specifically to do this, there's probably going to be a submission fee. It's not going to be much, but it's going to be enough for me to pay someone to look over it. We're also going to be involving AI in the early stage of the checks, because when you're checking a script, AI is going to be really good at doing that because it's already going to be trained. It already knows the entire story arc. It knows the entire Magna Veritas, all of the Alpha Canon events. It's already there. Giroux programmed it. Very well done.
And it won't give any spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers. But it knows. So if you put a story in, even now, it can tell you if that story fits in the canon. And then obviously every new submission that comes in that gets accepted gets added to the Canon, so it's going to check it against that as well. So your first stage goes to AI, and if the AI passes it and says this is, it doesn't have any nudity, it doesn't have any of this, then it's going to go through to a human. So that should hopefully get rid of anything that was just never going to make it through. So no one's wasting their time reading something that was never going to stand a chance. And then, like I say, every new chapter that comes in and every growth in the number of submissions, by that point, if there is, like I say, there's going to be a small submission fee, it's going to be enough to pay people to keep on top of this.
Yeah, the submission fee will also make sure people don't just take advantage and post 100,000 things generated but looking normal. So yeah, makes sense.
And when I started getting to know XUno like a year ago, the way I would describe it, and John wouldn't say this himself, but to me it was like, okay, imagine meeting George Lucas when he just started out, and everyone thought no ways this was going to succeed. I think that for anyone that's looking into XUno, there's the advantage of being part of the foundation, laying those building blocks, because a lot of times with things that's built, when it starts getting into the big corporations, then the average guy that was doing special things and contributing, well, he's forgotten. But XUno actually is being built in a way that won't happen.
Yeah, you'll be remembered for life. You're going to be a part of this.
You're building a legacy.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, and it's the story of a legacy. So it all fits together.
Well, I think that's it from our side, John. Anything else that you'd like to ask us?
None at this moment. I've actually had a message from the wife to say, when are we going to bed?
That's a
I'm
good
hither.
end.
Do you know what? I don't mind getting a message from the wife. It's all good. Yeah. So no, guys, I'm going to say, think of, run this through your head. You're going to have a load of questions going to come to you because this, like I say, it's a new concept and it's dangerously new. I can see that we're going to come up with resistance from certain quarters. That's okay. Not everybody's going to get it at first. That's okay. But I think an awful lot of people are going to get it, and I think it's going to excite a lot of people. But the challenge is still there to explain what is this new thing that literally has never existed before. So that's going to be the challenge, and I'm really hoping you guys will join me next week, where we're going to tease out a little bit more. We're going to open up some more information. There's so much to share. There's so much going on because, like I say, this concept didn't come together quickly. It took a very, very long time, a lot of study, and I'm convinced it's going to work. As long as we can get more than 30 people watching the YouTube videos, which is about what we're averaging at the minute. But hey, there you go. But yeah, just to say thank you for joining, guys, and I really hope you'll join me again next week.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Happily. It was a fascinating time. Thanks.
Yes, I look forward to it again. I do love good conversations. Have yourselves a great week, guys.
Thanks.
Stay
Same
well.
to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.